Hello and welcome back to Luluné Storylogue, where we uncover the real stories behind the music.
It really is such a beautiful, quiet scene we're stepping into today. I mean, just picture the imagery for a second. The green grass is finally stretching awake after this long, cold winter.
Yeah, that classic fresh spring feeling.
Exactly right. You step outside and, you can almost feel that distinct dampness of the morning dew in the air. But then across this peaceful, newly green lawn, these bright, completely uninvited yellow flowers just start dotting the landscape.
Right, those little yellow invaders. So for the artist, these dandelions, they represent this really grueling annual chore. Basically, ever since 2009, when a ban on strong weed killers took effect in Ontario, these weeds have just taken over the yard.
I know the feeling.
And so pulling them out by hand, it becomes this incredibly frustrating springtime ritual. But here's where the artist notices something really fascinating. In early spring, the very first dandelions, they sprout straight up from their roots.
Right, standing perfectly tall.
Exactly. So you take your gardening tool, you aim right for the flower, and boom, they're super easy to pull up, root and all.
Which sounds so simple, right? Until the whole environment shifts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because within just a few days, the battlefield totally changes. The stems start growing diagonally, kind of pushing the yellow flower far away from the actual root.
It's so wild how they adapt like that.
It really is. So if you aim your tool for the flower now, you completely miss the center. You just strike empty dirt. I mean, it's like dodging a blow instead of taking it head on.
Totally.
And the artist even playfully ponders, did the dandelions that were already pulled out somehow leave a warning for the new ones sprouting up?
Yeah, like nature sending out a distress signal. And, scientifically, we know it's actually just a biological response to the stress of being constantly pulled, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Because, the gardener easily eradicated all the straight growing ones early on, so only the naturally crooked ones survived to bloom. But emotionally, you can see exactly why the artist connects so deeply with that vulnerability.
Yeah, you really can.
You can just picture them putting down their muddy gardening tool, looking at these crooked bending stems, and realizing, oh, this isn't just about biological survival, like it's an attitude.
Right.
The artist actually confesses to their own past failures right there in the dirt. They realize how often they stubbornly clung to familiar, perfectly centered ways of doing things, refusing to bend, only to end up being pushed away helplessly when life got difficult.
Right, trying to take the hit head on and just breaking.
Exactly. And that leads us to this one deeply moving thought from the artist's notes. The idea that perhaps what we need isn't stubborn persistence, but the courage to flexibly step aside.
And, that asks such a profound question of you, the listener, like how often do you exhaust yourself holding on to a single right way of living or working?
I know, I do it all the time.
We all do, right? We tell ourselves we're just being strong, standing tall like those early spring flowers. But when true survival is on the line, maybe real strength doesn't look like standing rigidly in the center. Maybe it actually means having the grace to shift your center.
Yeah.
Step out of the direct line of impact.
It leaves us with this really quiet, haunting image of the empty garden. The soil has been turned over, the yard is peaceful again, but there's this final question from the artist that just kind of floats in the breeze. When, where, and how can we step aside?
Now let the melody speak what words cannot.
Please subscribe and like.
Spring came slow to Ontario green, pushed through the thaw, dust on tools. A restless hand woke the mower with a cough, felt the season turn its page, heard the quiet in the yard. Then the yellow started breaking through the places I had scarred. They don't look like much at first, just a flicker in the grass, but they spread and take their ground like they're built to outlast. Leaves pressed low against the earth, holding tighter than they seem, and a single stem rising right up through the green. I've been pulling at the roots, trying to win a losing game, aiming straight for the center, thinking everything's the same. But they bend, they shift, they lean, break breaking every rule I've set. Every time I think I've got them, they're in a place I haven't met. Early on, they're honest blooms right where they belong. Line it up and press it down, and they're gone before too long. But give it just a little time, and they start to rearrange. Flowers drifting off the middle like they're learning how to change. I get down and trace the stem, find it running out of line. The root is buried somewhere else, not where I traced the design. Something in that quiet shift stops me in between. Not every fight is won by standing where you've been. I've been digging in my heels, thinking that's what makes me strong. Holding tight to what I know, even when it feels wrong. But they bend, they shift, they lean, find a way to carry on. Maybe strength is in the moving when the ground you knew is gone. They don't ask which way is right, they don't fight the change, they just grow a little sideways when the center won't remain. I'm still pulling at the roots, but I'm seeing something new. Every empty patch of dirt feels like something breaking through. Yeah, they bend, they shift, they lean, and I'm starting to believe there's a different kind of courage in knowing when to leave. Now the garden's quiet again, evening settling in, but I keep staring at the places where they might have been. Wondering to myself as the light goes down, am I holding to a center that's no longer